If you're struggling with depression, the good thing is that there's just so many forms of recovery and treatment out there for you, from talk therapy to using exercise. Even last week, we spoke to someone who was talking about using Wing Chun Kung Fu as a way of recovery and therapy as well. But this week, we have a slightly different method to talk about. And so I'm really excited to get into that with our next guest. So that's going to be coming up next. Is something standing between you and your happiness? It was for me. I had to face my depression and the constant negative self-talk. Therapy helped me realize I deserve to be happy. That's why this podcast is called I Choose Health, because I made the choice to heal and I want to share that with you. As a gift to you, we've partnered with BetterHelp as our sponsor to help you start your own healing journey. We all face moments when life feels overwhelming, whether it's stress, anxiety, or just feeling stuck. Talking to someone can make a real difference. And that's where our sponsor BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp offers professional online therapy that's convenient, affordable, and entirely on your schedule. You can connect with a licensed therapist by video, phone, or even chat, whatever works best for you. Let our sponsor BetterHelp support you on your journey to better mental health. You can get 10% off your first month by going to betterhelp.com/iChooseHealth. That's betterhelp.com/iChooseHealth for 10% off your first month. Take the first step toward feeling better today.
As a teenager, I decided to live better, so I gave up the meat, eggs, and cheddar. At 20 and 30, I wanted more, so I strengthened my mind and my core. Living a life that is healthier and wealthier because I choose health.
Welcome back to the I Choose Health podcast. I'm your host, Stefan Lessie. I'm really thrilled to be with our next guest, Kelley Jensen. So Kelley Jensen, welcome to the I Choose Health podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So Kelley, I've been really interested to have a deeper knowledge of what you were telling me in regards to TMS. Right? So I'm really curious about this form of treatment in regards to depression. So I want our listeners to get a better understanding of what that is and how it works. So if you can just break that down for us.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me again. Transcranial magnetic stimulation is the third mental health treatment modality that you may not have heard of. You have heard of medication, you have heard of therapy, all kinds of different methods of therapy delivery. Some of them lifestyle, as you were saying, exercise and all of these great methods that we have for moving our body. There's another modality that is transcranial magnetic stimulation, brain stimulation. It's under the umbrella of neuromodulation treatments. It is covered by insurance for people who are struggling with depression, who have failed to make progress on medication and psychotherapy alone. But not a lot of people know about it. It's not widely prescribed. It's, by some estimates, prescribed by only 1% of all psychiatrists. But it is available. It is sitting in your health plan. It's drug-free. It's non-invasive. People get a lot of relief from it. It's actually been FDA-approved since 2008. It's been sitting in health plans since 2012. And we're in 2026, and there's actually many, many different modalities of it now that are available for depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder, migraines, smoking cessation, and anxious depression. But again, depression is the most widely used application for transcranial magnetic stimulation, and I just want more people to know about it.
So I'll tell you what my brain is envisioning, or the image that is created for me at this moment, where I hear transcranial, migration stimulation, and I'm thinking, like, okay, are we putting something on the brain? Are we like pushing something into the brain? Like, so these are
Yeah.
all things where I think someone hearing it may say, hey, that sounds a little scary, or that's something that I don't know about. So if you had to explain the procedure, what does that really look like?
Sure. Well, I wrote a little book on it, and I'm happy to send it to you. I'm happy to send it to anybody that is listening to your podcast. And it's got the background, the history of TMS, and the most relevant studies that it was used for approval of TMS. But basically what the treatment looks like is it is a magnet that is placed on your scalp, usually around the forehead. Again, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a neuroscientist, so I tend to speak of these things in layman's terms. The greatest way I heard of a neuroscientist talking about it, a psychiatrist as well, he said that think of your brain as a phone and think of the magnet as a phone charger. So it is placed on usually somewhere on your forehead, and it delivers a magnetic pulse, and those pulses stimulate the brain and stimulate neurons and stimulate connectivity in your brain. There's a lot of science behind it. Again, it's detailed in this paper. And I encourage everybody that's curious about it to go, you can watch all kinds of videos on it, across social media and YouTube. But it is just that. It is a magnetic pulse delivered to your scalp through a series of treatments. And depending on the treatment protocol, depending on how that treatment is delivered, it is usually 5 days a week for 6 to 8 weeks. And then there's some accelerated protocols where you, almost like an intensive outpatient, where you are in the clinic for a long period of time and you get the magnetic pulse in even intervals throughout the day. And those are accelerated TMS protocols. They are rapidly gaining popularity and they're very effective for people who are in the throes of suicidal ideation, people who have very acute symptoms.
So for my audience listening, people are like, okay, who's Kelley Jensen? What is her background? What's her expertise? Why is she doing this work? So if you can just break it down for us a little bit further as well.
That is an excellent question because, yes, I'm not a doctor and I am certainly not a scientist, but I'm a mother. I'm the mother of a 26-year-old autistic young man. And when he was 22, my son is severely autistic. When he was 22, he was developing a hoarding problem that was consistent with his comorbidity of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And he was really debilitated, not so much by his autism, but by his OCD. And I was desperate to help him when I had him on a cocktail of drugs that were recommended to me by very prominent psychiatrists, and none of them were effective. He was getting worse and his condition was getting more and more acute. So I said, forget autism. What is available for OCD? There has to be something other than exposure therapy because, my son wasn't particularly verbal. So he could have never done exposure therapy, is sort of what they do for OCD, kind of desensitize you to those intrusive thoughts. There's got to be something else, I said. And that's a quick Google search led me to transcranial magnetic stimulation, FDA approved in 2018 FDA cleared in 2018 for OCD. And I thought, gee, that's weird. Why haven't I heard of this? Why hasn't anybody told me about this? Why haven't all these fancy psychiatrists told me about this? So, well, can autistic people do this? Yes, of course they can do it. Are there any clinics that specialize in treating autistic people? Because I wanted somebody that would really understand my son's quirky nature and his, somebody approaching him with a magnet was going to take a lot of patience and a lot of congeniality, right? So I really wanted somebody that understood the autistic personality. And I found a clinic in my area that did a personalized version of TMS that's called MERT, magnetic E-resonance therapy. And it's just the same machines with some added diagnostics to personalize treatment. And they have the treatment itself, MERT for autism, is quite well known in the autistic community. So we tried it and it was amazing. It was quite consequential. It was by far the greatest intervention that we did for him. We saw results across the board and I was hooked. And I started to work with the doctor to be an advocate for other parents because I was really upset that nobody had ever told me about it. And I just didn't want any other mother in my position to not know that something was out there before. She's like, am I really going to give him another class of medication? Am I really going to up the dose on the one that he's taking? Why? Is there something else we can do? I don't want another mother to not have that information. So that's how it started. And it just sort of mushroomed from there. And now I am helping the prescribing physician manage and run his clinic, doing things exactly like what I'm doing right now, telling everybody about it.
Right. So I believe that it was 1985 that the British engineer, Dr. Anthony Barker, alongside his colleagues, they were the ones that started developing, that process of TMS as we know it now.
That's correct.
But then it was said that for clinical trials, in depression. It was started to be used for clinical trials for depression back in the 1990s, and then received FDA clearance in 2008. So, are you able to give a historical pathway as to how it came from being used for experimental research and then being seen as a possible tool for helping with depression?
Yes. So you very all of the studies originated again in Scandinavia, like you said. Those are still where those machines are by and large manufactured. And then it was largely used in research facilities and teaching hospitals throughout the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, and it gained FDA clearance in 2008 for depression. And there has been a steady increase in FDA clearance since then. It continues to be studied, it continues to be researched, it continues to be offered in circles that know about it. I'm very proud to tell you that the newest clearance just came in June of this year for MERT for PTSD. MERT was the protocol that I did for my son. MERT for PTSD received FDA clearance in June of 2026, and it was developed and researched and presented to the FDA by a company called Wave Neuroscience, and it is the first new medical intervention for PTSD in over 25 years. And I'm very proud to be a part of that. PTSD is a crippling struggle, much
Mhm.
like OCD was for my son. So I really want everybody to follow, the road from FDA clearance to insurance coverage is long and hard fought, but the first step in getting there is clearance. So now that clearance is with us, we have to take it over the hump, right, so to speak.
I'm thinking about it, right? Because we know that, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and, depression obviously are categorized differently. But then I wonder how much of it has to do with the time that one is exposed to a particular depressant, right? Something that's causing them depression, whether it's a particular thought, it's a certain environment. But I imagine, like, I think about soldiers who go to war and they're
Right.
constantly, dealing with loss and death around them consistently. Those
And
are things.
noises, the noises too, the constant boom and those, the people who have been around a lot of war, 4th of July can be very hard for them, right? The boom,
Mhm.
boom it can be a rumination. So all of those things, yes.
Right. So I wondered to what extent, because I'm not sure with like PTSD, right? Like your exposure to these certain elements for a certain period of time, I imagine is probably shorter, right? Like let's say a war goes on for a year, two, three, whatever. Whereas now someone who's been suffering depression for 10, 20, 30 years, um, how much of it is linked to how that person is conditioning themselves, if that makes
Yeah.
sense, right? Because it's
I
like,
mean, it's all of those things, right? It's
right.
all of that. It is a little bit of everything. It is lifestyle choices. It is, who you have in your life to support you. It's what's coming home for you when you get back from war. And, PTSD, of course, we think of soldiers and first responders as well. We should, but PTSD arises from domestic violence, sexual trauma. These things ruminate in our minds for a very, very long time. So it is a condition that has not had a lot of options, and it does lead to depression. To your point, when something is replaying on loop in your head over and over, that is a depressive episode in and of itself, right? And so it can quickly spiral into a full-blown depression.
So I have a question. So I imagine that, with the people that I imagine they're folks that you've worked with in regards to this particular type of treatment. Um, how quickly have you seen this type of process work, right? This type of
Yes,
therapy.
that's a great question. It's all across the board. Some people notice a difference right away within treatments. In our clinic, we do treat a lot of young. The treatment is FDA cleared for those with depression ages 15 and up, and some of the other conditions 18 and up. Meaning that for an adolescent who is at age 15 who has a depression diagnosis, they are eligible for TMS if they're like seeking insurance coverage.
Okay.
So that's pretty young, right? A 15-year-old doing treatment. They tend to, believe it or not, get the, the fastest results. And we in our clinic, people who are not relying on insurance coverage, who are paying out of pocket for treatment, it's safe to do on those under 15. And so we do treat a lot of autistic kids, a lot of kids with ADHD, a lot of kids with developmental delays. They tend to see results a little bit faster because their brains are more placid, because they're sensitive to the stimulation, because they don't have a lot of negative coping mechanisms yet. Adults have a tendency to have turned to uh, negative reinforcements to manage keep themselves numb, drugs and alcohol. Children don't have that. Um, but everybody responds a little differently. Everybody's recharge, as they say, is slightly different. And some people get the greatest benefits after the 6-week treatment course is over.
Mhm.
And it's not as well known how and who and when you will respond to the treatment. Most
Mhm.
people get some relief. I feel like that's akin to medication. Medication, some people have horrible side effects with one medication, are able to manage another medication. Some people, one medication doesn't work for. Some people never get relief from any medication. So, mental health treatments are highly personal to the person. So, and TMS is no exception.
What do you say to the person that says, okay, like, Kelly, I hear what you're saying. It sounds like it has great results. But then, okay, now I've gone through the 6 weeks of therapy, using this process. But now, the same environment that I was in still exists, right? I'm still dealing with whether or not, like, that person's depression has been brought on by financial problems, or as you talked about, with abusive relationships. So what do you say to the person that is maybe skeptical of this type of treatment just because they know that, okay, when they're done, maybe that same environment is still there?
Well, that's an excellent question. The first thing I always say is that skepticism is a symptom of depression, right? Oh, why bother is a symptom of depression. It masks a cynicism sometimes, but the notion that I shouldn't bother because my situation will never prove is not how you move forward in life, right? You move forward by taking a deep breath and approaching your problems, because I don't mean to minimize someone's financial struggles or someone's, relationship dilemmas, but one step at a time. And there are tools that you need to access to make those things more manageable in your life. But that's pretty hard to do if you think it's not possible. That's pretty hard to do if you're in a depressive state and you're not thinking clearly, right? So there's never a substitute for new habits, better communication, you know, better self-actualization. But that in itself is hard work. And there's so many methodologies for how to realize all of those goals. It's hard work, and sometimes hard work is too overwhelming when you're not sleeping. TMS is known to help sleep. You're not sleeping, you're in a depressive state, you feel like hope is gone. That's where you start. Reminding yourself that hope is never gone. Hope is, just maybe not as you pictured her. Maybe she's not ethereal and beautiful. Maybe she is a soldier that's kind of muddy and mucky, right? But she's there with you, and she can help you through the next phase of your life. But you have to start somewhere and start with your brain.
Right. So, after the 6 weeks, are patients usually advised to, enter into some type of, talk therapy arrangement? Like, what is the usual arrangement post treatment, right? So
Yeah,
that
at
they're
the
making sure they're
anytime yeah, well, the kids that we see, another reason why they do so well is because they are usually in therapy. They're getting ABA or speech therapy or occupational therapy. They're in school, so they have some access to therapies, in their classroom if they're under IEP. So they're doing great because they're engaged in all of these exercises that we all need to do to actualize our potential. Course, with adults that are not in school, of course, we advocate, we have resources, we encourage them to revisit therapy if they've been out of therapy for a while, to try a new therapy. A lot of people come to us on the recommendation of a therapist, and so that's great. And one of the things I'm most proud of is that people tell us that after treatment, therapy, exercise programs, nutrition, all of that becomes much more fun. They start to
Right.
enjoy it. They start to see progress much more steadily, much more rapidly because they're feeling better, right? They're physically feeling better. And so then that progress begets more progress. And so they're trying different approaches to therapy. They're, doing things they couldn't bring themselves to do before.
So, I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable for a second. So, I go back to not too long ago. I was in a situation where I did have to, go to a hospital, and they advised me to do some therapy following up, right? Because unfortunately, I did, and I had spoken about this on podcast, not this particular situation, but I had threatened, self-harm at that particular moment. And then, I was taken to the hospital, was there overnight. And thankfully being in New York, this might sound funny, but being in New York requires you to spend the night in the hospital, right? Whereas like I think Florida is this, it's like a 3-day process before you're admitted for 3 days and you go through this whole therapy process, right?
Mm.
Um, and I wonder, and I know it's not a answer for everything, but I'm curious as to know what that might look like for me, someone who has had some issues in the past and dealing with depression and ideation and stuff like that, where it could lead to, better mental process, right?
A hundred
Um,
percent.
and I'm just curious about because I guess I'm thinking about it for myself at this moment right now. So
No,
how
it's
would
funny
that
because
look? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So it's funny because the one of some of the accelerated treatments, the accelerated transcranial magnetic stimulation protocols that referenced earlier, one of them was developed at Stanford. It's called Saint, and it is specifically for suicidal ideation. It's specific. It's much more of an intensive outpatient treatment. It's 5 5 days, 10 treatments a day for 5 days, and then there are other accelerated protocols that are not quite so demanding, but they're you can do up to 10 treatments a day, but they are all geared for people who are more acutely um, affected with intrusive thoughts. They I highly recommend them. I know that the goal of the doctors that patented the Saint protocol is for people who go to emergency rooms to be told about it. Our own doctor in our clinic was an emergency room doctor, and he, you know, because of his experience in the emergency rooms, wants to make sure that people know to follow up after, an acute episode. I highly recommend that you look into it. There are some contraindications. It's a magnet, so you can't do it if you have a pacemaker. You can't do it if you have certain metals in your body. Sometimes with the soldiers, believe it or not, they have shrapnel. So that sort of disqualifies them for treatment. If you have active seizure disorder that's not well managed, you can't do it. Um, but I encourage everybody to look into it. I encourage you to look into it. It's a great tool for mental health, and it's something that it's not drug-free, non-invasive. You can do it again. So,
Um,
we have some of the patients that we've treated in our clinic that much prefer it to medication and do it once a year. And it's covered by their insurance. Some plans are covered every 6 months. Some plans cover it once a year, but for them, it's much more a reset, that phone charger analogy for them, and they really appreciate having it in their toolkit.
So I know you've talked about, people who are, like your son, who are on the spectrum with autism as well. And as you said, they tend to do pretty well with that therapy. So I'm wondering for most clients, how long do those benefits last, and how long is it before, a patient is coming back saying, hey, I think I may need to do this again. Like, how long does it usually last?
That's a great question. My son, he did it. Well, it was over 3 years ago, and then he did a full 6-week treatment over 3 years ago, and then about a year and a half later, he did what they call a touch-up. Well, it must have been inside a year. If it's inside a year, you don't have to do the full 6 weeks. So he did 4 weeks, so it must have been inside a year. We started noticing some manifestations, um, and he hasn't needed it since. Some people do it once a year because their insurance plan covers it, and it makes them feel. It does make the brain tick just a little bit faster. So some people do it because they feel sharper, and that's just
Mhm.
a personal preference. But some people never need to do it again. Again, it's highly personalized. Some people are going through a situational depression, and they have a SSRI, and it helps them get through a minor episode of depression, and then they never need it again. People are, it's as different as people are different, right? And it lasts different for different people. But I would say probably the majority of people do it once and may need a touch up another time in their lives. And then they're usually pretty good to go. But some people enjoy doing it as often as it's covered by their plan.
Right. So I'm curious to know as well, like what surprises patients most about the experience.
That it doesn't hurt. It does feel like a gentle tapping. It's not painless. And some of the accelerated protocols are a little bit more intense, and they do hurt a little bit.
Yeah.
But the standard TMS, it just feels like a light tapping. Some people come to really enjoy it and come to think of it as me time. You come in, the treatments last about 15, 20 minutes. Come in and you sit in like it looks like a recliner, really, for all intents and purposes. And you just sort of relax, and a neurotech administers the treatment, and people find it to be me time, and they enjoy the entire experience. And then probably I'd say with the kids, the first 10 to 14 treatments, they tend to get very, very hyper. So
Mm.
sometimes it's a little bit unmanageably hyper for families, and the machine needs to be adjusted. But they tend to be in a great mood. So that's the overwhelming thing we hear. And then for all patients, we hear better sleep
Mm.
across the board. And the vast majority of people, we hear that they are sleeping better. It's known to reset circadian rhythms, and so sleep, 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 better sleep is probably, I'd say, the overwhelming thing that I mean we hear a lot.
I think that was probably my next question because I'm wondering what is it about magnetic pulses exactly that help with depression and other mental health conditions, right? Because um, I imagine that our bodies are so dysregulated, due to everything we're dealing with. I'm in New York City, so I'm bombarded with a lot, daily. So what
Right.
is it about magnetic pulses that, make it an effective treatment for depression and other and other mental health conditions?
So I encourage everybody to geek out on the science with the doctor. There are some wonderful doctors that will go into great details all across social media, and again, they're referenced in this paper. But from a layman's term, from a not a doctor's term, I am told that it stimulates neurons, and those neurons help reset the patterns in your brain that have become dysfunctional. Better
Yes.
connectivity, better neural pathways, newer neural pathways, and that this is the language that I get from the doctors, but I will let them get into the detail of the exact mechanics of that stimulation.
So I'm going to ask a question that most people are probably thinking right now, and that's, what are the common side effects from this, right? Because, we take certain drugs or whatever, and
Yeah,
we expect certain side effects. So some people are probably wondering, with
yeah.
this, what are side effects?
So it's generally well tolerated. Uh, for the kids, hyperactivity. Adults tend to not get hyper the way the children do. But hyperactivity for the kids, irritability. You can be slightly irritable in the
Mhm.
first few days of treatment, and then you can have these they call it the dips. So you do sometimes. A lot of people report that they feel great right away, and then around week 3 they get a little dip, and
Mm.
that's pretty normal. But then you come back out of that, and then you feel really, really good again. And physically, sometimes a headache, they're treatable with just over the counter medication. Um, some people report, quite a lot of people report that they're very, very sleepy, that it takes a lot of energy out of them. And then again, that's all in the beginning of treatment. And they're actually all really good signs that the treatment is working for you, but it's a side effect, and it's part of undergoing the treatment.
So a two-parted question. I wonder during this process and everyone you've worked with, Like, what is the most dramatic transformation that you've witnessed? And apart from that, is there a patient's story that has stuck with you the most?
Um, well, my son, obviously.
Sure.
Oh, there was a soldier that he was retired from the Navy, and he came in, and he had an autistic daughter, and he wanted her to have treatment, and because he wanted more for her, but he was just very numb, and he was reticent. I think she was like maybe 5. So they did treatment together, and it was extremely beautiful, and to watch the transformation in both of them, particularly him. She was a young child, and so she was doing great, and she did great, and from the family keeps in touch, and she continues to do great, but to see him go from very disengaged, very numb, very stoic to smiling and laughing and sharing snacks with her is something I'll never forget. It was wonderful. And so he would do treatment, and she would sit on his lap, and then she would sit on his lap for her treatment, and they stick with me, and again, maybe that not even the most dramatic results, just yeah, I would say that was probably one of the more dramatic results. We had, a woman who had attempted suicide twice, and she couldn't work. She had a very high stress job. She couldn't work, a very important job, a job that is, contributing a lot to all of our, collective health and well-being, and she couldn't work. Um, she was very reticent to treatment, and she was doing the intensive treatment, so she was here all week, and she had a very difficult time believing that it would help her, and it was, her family had to come with her to help her, navigate staying with us for 5 days, and she's back at work. She's feeling better than she's ever felt. Her mother actually called to tell us that it saved her life, and that was quite rewarding, and, she sticks with me. And then there was an autistic young girl who was probably 14. She was nonverbal, and she was, not able to look forward in the car. So, too much sensory input for whatever reason, we don't know exactly because she was nonverbal, but she would get in the car and she would do this, and she
Right.
couldn't look forward. It was just too much for her, like this. But then she'd get wherever they were going, and she'd be car sick, right? Because she was turned backwards, and
Yeah.
or keeping a camera on her in the car so that they could play back some of the behaviors for the therapist because she had some
Yeah.
she tended to act up in the car, again, probably because she was not facing forward. And so
Yeah.
she caught her probably 4 weeks into treatment. The camera caught her, she was like this, and she just turned forward. And
Yeah.
that I'll never forget her because we have it on camera of her turning forward, and it's like, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you're a parent and you understand that to get the kid to just look forward so that they don't get car sick, so that they're
Mhm.
calm and their bodies are calm, that's a really, really big deal, and everything that can happen now for the rest of the day because he's able to sit in the car properly was a big deal for me.
Yeah. Right. But in terms of TMS, where do you see it 5 to 10 years from now?
Well, hopefully, that's the greatest question of all, and hopefully, from talking to folks like yourself, um, and your audience is listening and being engaged, hopefully more people will access it. There are some one-day protocols on the horizon, believe it or not. That is, it's one of those kind of things where the neuroscience and the researchers are going faster than the consumers are catching up.
Yes.
And I hope that gap closes in the next 5 years, and again, some of these protocols that are one day are pretty amazing, and it would be I don't see that happening in 5 years, but maybe 10 years from now, it'll be something that is just incorporated into your therapy. So you'll go the first day, you'll do TMS, it'll be a one-day protocol, and then you can start the rest of your therapy. So that would be the dream. And then more and more conditions, more and more serious psychiatric conditions,
Mhm.
because some of these one-day protocols are do work a little differently, and the hope, goal, and the objective of the researchers is to expand the conditions that can, have access to them.
So you said that the hope is that it can probably work with more, severe psychiatric conditions. Potentially, do you see this maybe even working for someone with, schizophrenia or bipolar? Like, it's just something that you could see working for
I
someone with
sure hope
those
so.
conditions.
I sure hope so. I mean, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not gonna make promises on behalf of doctors, but, I mean, I do read quite a bit of the research, and I do read where they're going. People who have schizophrenia, and certain bipolar disorders, that's another contraindication. They cannot do this version of brain stimulation, but they do have access to invasive versions of brain stimulation. Um, we were talking before the recording started about ECT. ECT is not really very well known either. It is definitely invasive. It people do have access to it though, usually at teaching hospitals, and I encourage anybody that is struggling with those conditions to be proactive and to look into that for now, and hopefully the way non-invasive technology is progressing, maybe one day it will be available to them, and I hope so. I really do hope so.
Right. And then, are there any new technologies or protocols that you are excited about?
The one-day protocol,
Mhm.
which again, if that'll be hopefully maybe in a year or 2 from now, I can come back on and I can tell you all about the one-day protocol, and it works from what I understand, it delivers the pulse much more efficiently, and so that should be a very interesting discussion because 'cause it'll kinda change things. Um, Merck for PTSD, just FDA clearance, very excited about that. That is, the only treatment options for people with PTSD, of course, lifestyle choices and, therapy, but there's 2 SSRIs that have been FDA approved for PTSD, and that's really it. So this is a very exciting and long overdue treatment option for that condition, and those are probably the things that are most on my line sight.
Yeah. So we're gonna shift gears a bit, and we're gonna do some like rapid fire questions. Okay.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So we're gonna call it myth or fact, and
Okay.
we all surrounding TMS. So myth or fact, TMS changes your personality.
Myth.
Okay. Myth or fact, TMS is only for severe depression.
I mean, myth, but it is a fact that depression in the more severe setting will only enjoy the insurance coverage, but it will help any depression.
Right. Hey, myth or fact, TMS is painful.
Myth.
And then myth or fact, you have to stop working while receiving treatment.
That's a myth, but
Yeah.
as a practical matter, some people a and I encourage you to, particularly if you're doing the accelerated protocols, and you can take a week off work, take a week off working and get it done in that week. Um, you know, that's a great option, but it
Yeah.
is something that it is designed for you to be able to do it while you go to work and continue on your life. So a myth, technically a myth. And
And then what?
the other thing I want to say about it, I know this is rapid fire questions, but we've kind of gotten away from being together, right?
Mhm.
So we're online for therapy. We're over Zoom. But there's something about you have to go into the clinic. You sit with an actual person. She or he, administers your treatment. You see the doctor. We used to back in the autism days when my son was little, the waiting room was a very powerful place. It was a place of community. It was a place where you literally knew you were not alone because you were
Right.
with other people. And that is, the kumbaya moment of TMS.
Right.
It is togetherness. And I feel like in this crazy world that we are living in, it's something we all need more of.
I think you're 100% correct. Like I noticed there's a difference when, of course, this is a great interaction here, a great interview here, but I noticed that I feel something different when I do a physical episode, right? When I do
Uh-huh.
an in-person episode
Yeah.
versus a virtual episode. Or, just 2 days ago, I was working late. And so, I have a 2-year-old daughter. So my wife called me, video called me for my daughter to see me. And, it was a great interaction. I'm laughing and talking to my daughter. But obviously, it feels way better to hold my daughter and to kiss my daughter, stuff like that. So I think you're right about there's something magical about human interaction that if we were to just really resume more of that, I think would be better for society.
I agree. I mean, it's something, like I said, the magic of knowing you're not alone because you're physically see someone, right? And so they're going through what you're going through, and you know that. It's irrefutable evidence, isn't it?
Yeah. And then the last thing for rapid fire, what's one thing you wish everyone knew about mental health treatment?
That there's no one modality for everybody. It is not something to be cured. It is something that we all have to learn to manage. It is a chronic condition. I know that's more than one thing, but I just really want people, people sometimes will feel better and then they think that they're done. Well, it's something that will always have to be managed. And there's a lot of ways to manage it. And you need as many tools to help you as possible.
Right. All right, so we're gonna come into a close, but in terms of like personal reflection, what has working with patients taught you personally about resilience?
Uh, that a little bit of progress is a win. You know, that a little transformation, that turning your head forward is a win, that being able to laugh at a joke is a win, that hope is not the end of the game. Hope is in the fight with you, that little things matter.
And in terms of mental health care, what gives you hope for the future, its future of mental health care?
People like you who are having me on to have this talk, and you know, you're not obligated to let me give you my pitch about TMS, and you're curious about it, and you want to know, and you want people that you know to know about it. So that's what gives me the most hope.
Yeah.
You know,
Uh, it's funny because I know just prior to this conversation, I talked about having an open format. But I remember very early on in the when we started this podcast back in 2023, I remember sometimes you do have people who reach out and say, "Hey, I have a client that I think would be a good fit for your podcast." And I don't want to put any names on there, but someone had put a particular person forward to me to be like, "Hey, this would be a good person for the podcast." And then some of the things he started talking about were really strange,
hmm.
and I was just like, "I don't know about this." So I, long and short, I did not do the interview. It was just too weird for me. I I'm not gonna lie, I didn't have the heart to tell this person like, "Hey, let's pass on this. I'll
Right.
just, I'll speak to you guys at a later time." But it was just super weird. After the recording, I'll tell you what it was.
Okay, okay, great, great, great. Yeah, yeah.
But
I mean,
then
I can't lie. I've had those experiences too, but overwhelmingly not. I mean, listen. I don't know about your experience in life. My experience in life is 99% of the people that you meet are lovely, and 1% of those people is just not for you. And then leave it at that. Let's just leave it at that, right?
yeah. And if someone listening today feels like they've tried everything, what would you want them to hear?
Don't give up. Keep going. Try TMS. If TMS didn't work for you, try one of the newer protocols. If that didn't work for you, go back to your doctor, get a second opinion, get a third opinion, access telehealth, but don't give up. You, you are managing a chronic condition. So there is something that will help you. You have to keep going. And again, hope is there with you. She's just not beautiful. She's a little bit ugly, right? She's beaten up, but she's there.
Yeah. So I knew you've probably heard a lot of questions about TMS over the years. What is maybe one question you think that, people have not considered and you would probably want to hear more that people are asking you about TMS?
Well, everybody asks me why I haven't heard this. That's the number one question I get. Why haven't I heard of this? And there's an air of skepticism, rightfully so, when they ask that. And I wish I had a better answer than because nobody's prescribing it. But what would be the question that I wish people would ask of why not me? I think that's what I would like people. Why not? Why shouldn't I try it? Why not? Why not me? Why can't I feel better? Why can't I try this? Why can't, you know, why am I not worth it?
Mm, interesting. Interesting. Well, Kelly, this was definitely insightful. I mean, just like other people you've worked with, like this is my first time hearing about it. And so, I've one of the things I love about this podcast is that I've learned a lot. right? Everything from finding out about what kratom is, right? I had no idea what that was. Finding out about kava, right? Things like that have just been
Yeah.
really cool. And just to get emails from different people like, hey, let's talk about this subject. I'm like, okay, let's do it. 'Cause I've never heard about it myself. So this is just, pretty interesting. And I'm glad to find out there's, options for us who are dealing with like so much, from depression to suicidal ideation. So I'm really glad to hear that there's something outside of your traditional, talk therapy or medication that people can look into.
I appreciate your time. And again, I have this paper that is sort of like all of the protocols TMS, and I will gladly send it to you. And please forward it to anybody that's curious. And you can find me at ask at 1BPT, and I'd be happy to send it to anybody that's listening to this podcast that wants more information. I also have a podcast of my own that I
Cool.
did start with a friend. We call ourselves Refrigerator Moms. You can find us at refrigeratormoms.com for more information about autism and our approach to parenting neurodivergent.
Yeah. Well, don't go too fast because I do want to talk about a podcast.
Okay.
So one, like, how did that podcast come about? I'm imagining that you said refrigerator mom, so I imagine your co-host has probably had a very similar experience to you as well, being a mom. So just, get into, you know, that podcast and how it started, how it's going. So just give us a breakdown of that as well.
Sure. Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. So yes, so I have a very dear friend. We She has a son that is also autistic. They're both young adults now, and we have been friends for over 20 years, in the field of what do I do about this? Autism is one of these kind of things where there's no clear-cut solution answer. You're constantly trying new things and evaluating approaches. And over the years, she was my wingman, I was her wingman. And when I started the clinic, I was editing the website. She's an editor by trade, and we were in my office working on the website, and a mom knocked on the door. She had had a daughter that had a late diagnosis. She had gone off to college, had a breakdown in college, had to bring her home. A late diagnosis of autism followed, and the daughter was doing treatment in the clinic, and the mom wanted to thank me, and then she just fell apart and said, "What did I do? How did I miss this? I'm a terrible mother. I just thought she was quirky, but she was always so bright." And she was, really upset and racked with guilt. And we sat with her for, my friend's name's Juliana. Juliana and I sat with her for a very long time. And when she left, Juliana just said, "You have to do something about that. Nobody should feel that way. No mother should feel that way." And we thought long and hard about what we wanted to say and how we wanted to be a sounding board for other mothers that didn't have each other the way we had. And the Refrigerator Moms was born. And Refrigerator Mom is a term that is tied to the origin story of autism. The autism diagnosis in the 40s and 50s was largely believed to be mom's fault. So the refrigerator mother theory said that you were cold to your child and you needed to warm up to your child, you needed to hug your child more, and if you didn't see improvement, your child was going to be institutionalized, which was obviously a lie, obviously horrible advice. It was, taking mothers that were trying to advocate for their children and get their children help and making them feel guilty. And we decided that we should pay homage to those women and
Mhm.
reclaim the name. And so we have called ourselves Refrigerator Moms.
Are you only doing that for moms who have kids on the autistic spectrum or other conditions as well?
So autism is such a big umbrella. There are people who have autism that function at very, very high level, but then still need help managing some autistic symptoms. And then there are people who are very severely and profoundly affected by their autism. So our podcast aims to give, ideas and suggestions for all of those, everything in between. And so we cover a lot of topics, a lot of parenting topics. And one thing we really agreed on was that we wanted people to have like this. So this is actually written by the Refrigerator Moms. And so all of our
Mhm.
topics start with a paper that is cited and researched, and you can look at it. Of course, it's an opinion piece, but it's an opinion piece that is backed up by the, research that we did to come to that opinion. And it's very much in the vein of, I'd call her and I'd say, "What do you think? Should I try TMS?" And she'd say, "Well, what do the studies say?" And over the years, we had such a library of all that information that um, that's all on our website. And so it's a paper, and then we talk about the paper, and the papers are free for all people who want to know about if ABA is worthwhile, or want to know about screen times, or want to know about the refrigerator mother theory, and all of those topics. We cover them all in our podcast and on the website.
Well, Kelley, thank you so much for sharing that information, and just thank you for spending your time with us today. And I really do appreciate it.
I appreciate you very much. Thank you for your generosity.
Yes. And for my audience, we definitely appreciate you as well. And again, I'm Stefan, just reminding you that choosing health is about choosing power, possibility, and purpose.